No. Doug! A Swiss woman was such a fan of Red Bull that she had the can's barcode tattooed on her arm. It turns out that it works when scanned. When was the last time you made a bad decision that turned out good?
Just when you think you're the first to think of something cool.
You're an idiot, Doug. Why live easy when you can die hard? Welcome to the diehards. We all know crushing the early rounds is key to a championship run, but winning your league happens in the middle rounds. Last week, we covered QBs and running backs. If you missed it, make sure you check it out on our YouTube channel, Football Diehards. And tonight, we dig deep to uncover the wide receiver and tight end gems who can turn your roster into a juggernaut. Join in and let's find the next breakout stars for your team. I am your host, JJ Wenner, and I am joined by the Orthical himself, Doug Orth. And to help us out, we are excited to introduce tonight's guest for the show. He is one of the brightest and most innovative minds in fantasy football. You may know him from DLF, his outstanding work with Fantasy Cares, or his fantastic reputation as a commissioner extraordinaire. You can find him on the socials at Ryan Mc23. It's Ryan McDowell.
What's going on, guys? I'm not sure what I've gotten myself into here tonight. We got barcode tattoos. We got some Dynasty breakouts.
When Doug dusts off the prop humor, I don't know where it's going to go from there. That's good stuff for sure.
That's good stuff. See, he is the genius. This guy.
Oh, Lord, just because he agrees with you. It's going great. How are you?
Man, so good. Yeah, JJ, I know you and I share a profession, and in my part of the world, we're already on summer break. So yeah, I can't complain.
I can see it in your eyes. You can tell when a teacher's on summer break versus that pleading look I have to just hit Friday.
It's almost here. Almost, man. Just a few more days and you're there.
You can taste it in the air. All right. Well, Doug, is there anything that the good people should know before we start?
Yeah, well, most of the players we choose this week are going to be for the deep league crowd. Most of them can be had for a third-round rookie pick at most. It does no good to call any Jameson Williams a breakout player this season just because he's coming off a 1,000-yard season and going in the 5th or 6th round of startups right now. Same thing goes for Jake Ferguson at tight end. He's just a season removed from 71 catches. He already broke out.
Oh, okay, there's no reason to yell, Doug. I guess I won't call him a breakout then. But before we hit start, Jody Smith and the crew over at Fulltime are hard at work on the 36th edition of the Pro Forecast magazine. Make sure you are tuning in over the summer for your chance to win a copy to dominate your home leagues. And speaking of domination, Doug, kick us off with your first wide receiver breakout.
JJ, you are too kind. We saw a mini breakout from Cedric Tillman immediately after the Amari Cooper trade before the start of Week 7 last year. I remember it well because I emptied the equivalent of a small country's gross national product of FAB on him across all my high stakes leagues. Beginning in Week 7, Tillman was the number one receiver in fantasy for a 3-week period before the team went on a bye. The Saints, who were their opponent coming out of that bye, made sure to keep their focus on him in the first game before the dream of Tillman leading teams across the fantasy nation and to a fantasy championship died once he suffered a concussion that basically ended the season in week 12. While it should be noted that Jerry Jeudy became a strong fantasy starter at the same time Tillman was balling out and then became a must start after the injury, none of the 4 quarterbacks that threw a pass for Cleveland last year are back this season. In theory, that should mean every receiver will begin the season with a clean slate with all 4 of Cleveland's potential starters as a quarterback. As of right now, Joe Flacco would seem to be the most likely candidate of those 4 to start. If there's one thing Flacco still has plenty of at age 40, it is arm strength. Tillman and tight end David Njoku are the team's most viable vertical threats, so they should not have to contend with Jerry Jeudy or Deontay Johnson if we're going to go there. Some pass catchers on other teams might have to, because they're the deep intermediate to deep should be more of those targets. I fully acknowledge how easily Tillman's potential breakout could fall apart. The Browns could easily go ground and pound and try to ride their defense as much as humanly possible. Flacco could get replaced by week 10, leaving Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, or Stuart Sanders as quarterback, none of which possess the arm strength or aggressiveness to maximize Tillman's skill set. With that said, Tillman figures to be priced as a wide receiver 5 in drafts, even though we have seen that upside, that aforementioned upside. Flacco led the Browns to the playoffs 2 seasons ago, leaning heavily on Amari Cooper, whose role Tillman now occupies. Albeit unlikely, I think Tillman's range of outcomes includes him finishing as a top 30 fantasy receiver. What do you gentlemen have to say about Cedric Tillman?
I don't know, Ryan, where are you at on Cedric Tillman?
Well, I mean, I really like Tillman, and Doug mentioned it. You think back to that streak he had as a wide receiver 1, 3 weeks in a row. We saw his dynasty value spike as a result of that. Looking back at the December ADP over at Dynasty League Football, he was the wide receiver 45 and 86 overall in that Dynasty ADP from December. Since then, though, I mean, we mentioned the injury. Doug mentioned the injury that cost him playing time towards the back part of the season, and that certainly cost him value. It's kind of been a bit of a free fall value-wise since then. Currently 159 overall and wide receiver 68. So, yeah, just super cheap. And, I mean, that's going to be kind of the theme of the episode with all these players we talk about, that you don't even have to like them that much. You don't have to even believe in them that much because they're so cheap. Take a shot on Cedric Tillman, and you probably can't roster all of these guys that we talk about tonight, but grab 2 or 3 and hope that you hit that lottery ticket breakout.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Like, you don't want to build your roster around the guys we're talking about, but these are the lotto tickets. These are the ones who are going to take your roster to that next level and hopefully get you to a championship. Now, we do have a question from somebody listening. Jonathan, in Dynasty, are you going with Jauan Jennings or Pittman, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm still going with Pittman. It certainly feels like these two guys are going in different directions for a lot of different reasons. But I mean, I still trust Pittman a little bit more than Jauan Jennings.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you, sir. Doug, what is your thought?
Yeah, I'm going to pull up my dynasty rankings as we speak here. I think I've got Pittman just a little bit higher than Jennings, but it's closer than I would have ever imagined. Yeah. I will say, let me see if I can. Yeah, it's going to take too much time for me, but I think I would say I have Pittman probably 5 to 10 spots ahead of Jennings, but I'm acquiring Jennings wherever I can because you can still get him at a decent price because people think Ayuk's going to come back healthy. Pearsall's getting. I hate the term steamed up, but Pearsall's getting steamed up with the hamstring. It might set him back over the rest of the summer now, but that's Pittman for now.
So talking about Ricky Pearsall, I know that's one of the hotter names that people are bandying about in the Dynasty community. They kind of like what we saw at the end of last year, hoping that it then extrapolates itself into this season. Ryan, are you concerned at all about hamstring injuries? I hate hearing about any hamstring injury.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be concerned. That's one of those nagging things that can really bother a player for weeks at a time, maybe even through the entire season, depending on how severe it is. Of course, in Pearsall's case, we kind of know the story here. Was a very slow starter as a rookie, despite being the 49ers first round pick. We knew he'd be buried a little bit there behind Ayuk and Debo and of course Kittle and CMC there, at least for parts of the season as well. But those last 2 games of the season, we saw a wide receiver 1 game for Pearsall in week 17 in the fantasy championship week, and then followed that up with 19 fantasy points in the finale in week 18. So certainly, Doug mentioned getting steamed up and kind of being a riser. I don't know that he necessarily fits in this episode. He could certainly break out, but we're already seeing the value being pretty high with Pearsall. So he's not one of those guys that you can get for a third, like we talked about in the intro. So a different type of breakout player. Hasn't obviously had that fantasy starter season yet, but he's being valued kind of like he has already.
And if you want to find out what players are going for in real trades, I highly recommend going to DLF and using the Dynasty Trade Finder, something that I use very often.
Yep.
To find out where people are going in actual drafts. All right, Ryan, do you have a breakout candidate for us?
Well, I mentioned that we don't have to be too confident in these breakouts, and I'm glad I gave that caveat because I'm not too confident, but I'm at least interested in Michael Wilson in Arizona. He's really been the wide receiver 2 the past 2 seasons there. I expected the Cardinals to make a move, bring in someone of significance, whether it be through free agency or the draft, and they really didn't. Wilson's still primed to be the second option there, really the third option, because we know McBride gets wide receiver like targets there. But that's an offense that we should be excited about, assuming everybody's healthy, especially Kyler Murray. And you just wonder if Wilson can finally take that next step. He actually didn't have a single starter game. We're talking not one single game as a top 24 wide receiver last season, but did score double-digit points in 6 games, just 25 years old still, and just sneaking inside the top 200 over at DLF, according to our Dynasty ADP. So another guy similar to Tillman, who's very cheap, actually probably free, maybe even on the waiver wire if you're in those established Dynasty leagues already.
Yeah, Doug, where are you on Michael Wilson?
Yeah, this is, we talk about buy, sell. Well, he's a hold, and because first of all, if you have him, you're holding him. If he's on the waiver wire in the smaller Dynasty leagues, I would be keeping him there until maybe I clear some room for him. But he's a mystery. He's not a mystery box so much as he's just like you said. You got McBride, who's going to attract. I think McBride had 147 targets last year. I don't think he's getting quite there this year. But you got 2 bigger fish to feed. Marvin Harrison and McBride. If Harrison was to miss significant time, then I think you'd see someone who you could flex pretty easily. But I love the talent of Michael Wilson. I just don't know that. I don't think there's going to be enough balls there in Arizona to have him be anything more than good high upside bench depth. But I do like
double entendre when talking about balls. Lou Brunson says that sadly he doesn't think anyone outside of the top 2, more than likely just 1, will matter in Arizona as long as Murray is the QB. It does seem like Kyler Murray is sort of regressing. I thought he was going to be able to support more weapons there. I'm a little bit concerned about his growth.
Yeah, we haven't seen a ton of improvement, honestly, with Kyler Murray. It's funny. I was on another show last night, and someone mentioned ADP from Baker Mayfield's second season. So we go back to 2018, 2019 ADP, and sure enough, the guy was right that I was speaking with, that Baker Mayfield was the quarterback 3 back then. But regardless, Kyler Murray was the quarterback 11. And I said, it just feels like Kyler Murray's been the quarterback 11 for the past 6 years.
Yeah.
And, he's just always interesting enough, intriguing enough to sneak just inside the QB1 range, or sometimes just outside the QB1 range. He keeps us, keeps us on our toes with those huge fantasy weeks that he gives us 2 or 3 times a year. And then the rest of the time he's just okay. And that's even when he's healthy. So, ultimately I think Lou is probably right that this is McBride and Marvin's show, and probably nobody beyond that matters. But Wilson, I guess mostly I'm just surprised Wilson is still the presumed wide receiver 2 there. And he's certainly cheap or even free in Dynasty.
Well, and JJ, if I can get one comment in here quick.
Sure.
Hey, I know I let off with Tillman. I think Tillman and Wilson have about pretty much the same chance of being a Dynasty breakout. So maybe Tillman a little bit high, but I mean, we're splitting hairs here. I have Wilson on one of my 5 established Dynasty teams right now, and I'm holding him. I don't want to include him in a trade, because I don't want to. He's one of those guys I don't want to be wrong about, because I feel so confident in his talent. So if he sits there on my 24-man roster and occupies a spot for another year, so be it. I'm okay with that. He's one of the guys you want to bet on.
All right. Who is another guy you want to bet on, Doug?
Okay, well, we talked about Tillman and Wilson so far. This one's going a little bit deeper, and so he's going to be on your waiver wire in. I think he's the one on the waiver wire in all my 24-man roster Dynasty leagues. Much like Cedric Tillman, we only caught a brief glimpse of what Dyami Brown was capable of last season. Fortunately for him and his wallet, it came during the playoffs. In 3 postseason games, he averaged almost 5 catches for 76 yards. That was with the Commanders. 3 well-timed performances does not exactly excuse doing virtually nothing at the NFL level for 3.5 years, but there is some context to consider. Despite being a former 3rd-round pick, his path to playing time is blocked by Alpha Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and Jahan Dotson for at least 2 of those years. His quarterbacks in Washington over that time, here you go, JJ, Taylor Heineke, Carson Wentz, and Sam Howell, among others. Again, we cannot pretend as if Brown's career just started in 2024, but it helps to explain why a player known primarily as a deep threat did not see his career take off any sooner than it did. My reason for believing in Brown now hinges on 2 key factors. Trevor Lawrence rediscovering his previous form, and new head coach Liam Cohen visualizing Brown playing the same kind of role in his offense that Jalen McMillan did for Tampa Bay last season. Yes, McMillan did not take off until Chris Godwin got hurt. Yes, Brown will be no better than the wide receiver 3 in Jacksonville behind Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter to begin the season. But consider this. What happens if the Jaguars suffer a rash of injuries at cornerback? Don't you think Hunter will be asked to play more often there at some point? Or perhaps more likely scenario is that Hunter himself misses time. Hunter missed 8 games over his first 2 college seasons and was limited in a couple of games last year due to injuries. No, I suppose you can say that even if all that happens, Brown's not a true breakout, but I'm going to forecast Jacksonville running primarily out of 11 personnel this year, and Brown being something resembling a full-time player. As the 7th highest paid on this year's roster, and I check, that's in terms of annual average value, Dyami Brown is the 7th highest paid player on that roster. Brown will be useful at some point during the 2025 season. Guys have anything to say about Dyami?
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite wide receiver breakout calls. Okay. And I mean, when you're thinking about breakouts, typically you're looking for a player who's had some type of change in their situation, whether that's a new team, which is obviously the case here with Dyami Brown. Maybe a chance to move up the depth chart if another player is left, something like that, some opportunity. And actually Tillman and Wilson don't fit that category. Pretty much the same situation as last year. Although Tillman does have a new quarterback coming in. But as far as Brown goes, he's got the ideal situation, right? He's moving from that Washington offense, which was much more exciting last year, but as you outlined, not great the earlier years of his career. But I mean, in Dynasty, we just want to chase those explosive offenses. And I think the Jaguars have a chance to be one of those with Cohen there, with Trevor Lawrence hopefully healthy. And even if he's the wide receiver 3, I love Brown. Wide receiver 112 in our ADP. I mean, you talk about free. He is free. He's like 30 or 40 spots behind even Michael Wilson. So basically not even getting drafted in the majority of drafts. 269 overall is his ADP. And while he was pretty quiet during the regular season last year, Doug, as you said, exploded in the off season and really got our attention and when it counted.
He's one of those guys that I was so excited when Sam Howell was going to start for Washington because of that college connection. Might show. I was like, oh Lord. That didn't show through at all. I'm excited to see what he can do. Hey, listen, try to always think good thoughts, right? Put them out there and see what happens. Speaking of some players who need some good thoughts, where are we on Keon Coleman this year, right? Another player, can't call him a breakout. It's already valued too highly. But Ryan, where are you looking at Keon Coleman?
Yeah, Keon Coleman's tough for me because he was a player that I was not a fan of coming into the NFL. Was a guy I actually got to go to the combine and kind of sit in on his media access, and I didn't ask him any questions, but I heard his answers, and honestly, they were not very impressive. He, although he did call the Buffalo landing spot, he said he wanted to go to Buffalo with Josh Allen. So I don't know, maybe he knew something even as early as late February or early March back then. So I mean, when you don't love a rookie coming in for whatever reason, and then he doesn't perform well, the value's way down from where it was last year. So in a lot of ways, he feels like a buy low, but I'm kind of sticking with my priors here. I didn't like the profile. Didn't like honestly didn't like the talent. Really, all I did like was he did land in Buffalo with Josh Allen and kind of a wide open depth chart there post Stephon Diggs. That's still true. I mean, Khalil Shakir had a very solid season last year. We presume he's the wide receiver 1, but this is another team that didn't make a ton of moves on that wide receiver depth chart. Coleman could certainly be the wide receiver 2. If you tell me he outperforms Shakir this year, I wouldn't necessarily be shocked.
Wow.
But I'm still not chasing him, even with the discount. Just I didn't like him then. I didn't see anything last year to change my mind on that. So I'm mostly staying away. 112 overall, by the way, is his ADP, wide receiver 55, according to DLF ADP.
Doug, thoughts on Coleman?
Yeah, that ADP is the earliest I would consider him. I can understand why there would be a potential breakout for him. My thoughts are this. So I think Shakir, especially with that new contract extension he got here a couple months ago, I think that locks him in as the primary slot. And the reason I say that is because I think Keon Coleman's best spot probably would be as a big slot. I think just based on his size, Buffalo's trying to basically put a square peg into a round hole and make him the X. I don't know if that means he ends up having. You guys remember Reggie Williams from from Jacksonville about 10 years ago? He had 38 catches in 10 touchdowns. Something along those lines. Yeah. And I think that's where Coleman is going to be valuable. Because I think Dalton Kincaid is going to be better this year. I'm not saying like tight end, top 5 tight end or anything like that, but I think he'll be healthier this year. But I think Shakir is going to be the primary slot, and I think they're going to try to go through another season of forcing Coleman to be an X. They did just pay Josh Palmer $50 million a year to, I think, be the stretch Z. So, and then they have some talent behind. They have some talent behind those guys on the depth chart. So if Coleman's not performing over the first 6 weeks, I can see where he ends up being benched. At the same time, just like I said, use the example of Reggie Williams, I think he could easily be one of the primary focuses in the red zone too. So, but again, we're talking about guys who can get late, and there's reasons that they're going this late is because the odds are stacked against them in some way, shape, or form. So I can support a breakout here, even though I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, I'd say question their wide receivers, but I know their GM does not take that too well. So I think we should avoid that topic. Yes. He's happy with how they're performing. Who is our last breakout, Doug?
Well, I read something today that he really bulked up, and we well know we want our receivers to be bulked up, right? We want them to put on weight. Sometimes breakouts happen in fantasy because the talent dictates it, and other times they happen because the situation a player finds himself in. I'm going to tell you that while Roman Wilson does not lack the talent, I was not as big a fan as the draft prospect last season. Among other things, I knocked him for being a player who did too little off his first move and too much of his damage on second reaction plays at Michigan. There's also a chance he's a slot-only player, although I think he's more than that. Another problem I have with the potential breakout from him is that Arthur Smith has a tendency to shortchange the playing time of his top receivers, especially the number 2 receiver. I'm going to take you down a little statistical hole here for a second. In 2022 with Atlanta, this is when Smith was the head coach there, Olamide Zaccheaus. I have to remember, I used to pronounce his first name wrong, not his second name, his last name. So Olamide Zaccheaus' route participation was 66.5%. Van Jefferson's route participation was 55.4 in 2023. And then last year when Smith moved to Pittsburgh, Calvin Austin was the second highest playing time receiver. He was at 62%. Admittedly, we're not talking about elite receivers here, or even average ones for that matter. It gets worse for slot receivers in Smith's offenses, so the first obstacle here is for Wilson to prove he is more than just a slot. Another development that could derail the Wilson train, or whatever, I hesitate to even call it a train, it's more like just a caboose at this point, but is the Steelers' reported interest in a player like Trey Palmer. If that happens, I would feel reasonably good about replacing Wilson with that receiver, assuming he's at least as good as Palmer, and who I actually do like. Short of that, Wilson likely only has to beat out Robert Woods and Calvin Austin to line up opposite DK Metcalf. Another feather in Wilson's hat is that he can block, which is important since us fantasy managers do not like our receivers to come off the field because one of their teammates is so much better at something that our guy has to go to the sideline for. So wrapping up, Wilson is a hard-nosed player who Arthur Smith has to sign off. He's a hard-nosed receiver who Arthur Smith had to sign off on before his first season as the team's offensive coordinator. While he may not be a true complement to Metcalf in terms of possessing waterbug quickness, he showed the ability to separate at the college level, well, eventually anyway, and should have success in the intermediate area, while Metcalf handles most of the vertical stuff and Pat Freiermuth handles most of the stuff inside 10 yards. So much like De'Ami brought it earlier, I've been thinking we're talking about maybe a 50-catch stealing in 2025, but that level of production will play from time to time in fantasy, especially deeper dynasty leagues. Guys, have any thoughts about Roman?
Ryan?
Yeah, I'm mostly avoiding him again with all of these players. We're talking about very cheap, so not much risk, but not a guy I'm targeting. Basically didn't get on the field at all, had no real stats from last year, just 1 or 2 appearances, I believe, in games at all. And of course we look at that opportunity, the wide receiver 2 spot wide open, somebody has to claim it. But this is still a team where Arthur Smith is calling the shots on offense, and as of now, they don't have a quarterback. even if it's Rodgers, that doesn't give me that much more confidence. Yeah, I mean, this is not a total stay away. None of these guys are.
Right.
But yeah, I'm probably throwing the dart somewhere else other than at Roman Wilson.
And let's be clear, I have the least amount of confidence in Roman Wilson than the first two guys, or actually the first three guys that we talked about. So yes.
All right. Oh, we have a question from Lou. I understand how big of an if this is, but can Hunter Renfrow break out again in Carolina? Ryan, what are your thoughts about Renfrow coming back?
Yeah, that was a surprise, honestly. I was surprised when he didn't get signed. Is that just a year ago now? I was surprised when he announced his retirement, and then I was surprised when he came back. So I guess Hunter Renfrow full of surprises for me. I mean, it's tough to see it. Honestly, it's tough to see him even making that roster. I'm interested to see this Carolina offense in year 2 under that coaching staff. And I mean, we're talking breakouts. It feels like Bryce Young was on his way to a breakout season, late in the year, but adding McMillan, they still have Leggett, they still have Coker, who was so impressive last year. And obviously Adam Thielen's still hanging around. I don't see room for Hunter Renfrow there, but it would be a great story for sure. And you talk about free. He's not rostered anywhere that I've seen.
He's freer than free. I don't know what freer than free is, but that's what he is. Doug, thoughts about Renfrow?
Well, I don't know that there's too many case studies as far as guys coming back from ulcerative colitis, but that's what we're talking about here. Man, the guy can get open. Assuming he's everything he was before his 1-year retirement, or assuming he has that quickness, assuming he has that knack or that spatial awareness that made him so good before with the Raiders. I'll tell you what, I'll give him as much of a chance as I'll get Roman Wilson. I'll put it that way. But Ryan laid it out perfectly. I mean, it's going to be hard for him to break inside the top 4 of that group, and then we're talking about wide receiver 5 on your own team. Now you need injuries to happen. I tried to make a case here a couple of weeks ago when I was doing a blurb for USA Today, and I was writing up Hunter Renfrow, and I was trying to make a case that maybe Carolina moves on from Adam Thielen because of his age, but I don't see that happening. So yeah, it's a long shot. It's a long shot. I think Ryan said it as well as I could, so I'll cut myself off there.
All right, Lou, I hope that was a good answer for you. Gentlemen, before we get to tight ends, just a little word from our corporate sponsors. Diehards, Dynasty Leagues are without a doubt the best segment in all of fantasy sports. The Dynasty Football World Championships, now in their 13th season, are underway. Jump in a new startup and draft your own team from the beginning, and you'll be well on your way to becoming the next Dynasty King. Drafts start at just $75 with higher options available for high-stakes guys like Doug. Head to dynastyking.com and look for the Dynasty Football World Championships. All right, now for my favorite position in all of football, tight ends. Love me some tight ends. So does the Scott Fishbowl this year. So
I was going to say the same thing.
I'm drafting all tight ends this year. What could go wrong? So give me, Ryan, who is a breakout candidate for you?
Yeah, you can start 11 of them this year, JJ.
And I will.
I can't wait to see it. Can't wait to see those lineups. Man, there's a lot of tight ends. I actually found more tight ends I liked as possible breakouts than wide receivers, which may be a surprise just given the volume of the positions. I hate to even call this guy a breakout because it feels like we've tabbed him as a breakout each of the past couple of years, but I still believe in Chig Okonkwo of the Titans. Had another strong season last year. He was the tight end 21, gave us 4 tight end 1 games. Most of those, by the way, coming late in the season. So hopefully that trend continues into this year. Of course, we know they've got the new quarterback in Cam Ward, and another team that didn't make a ton of changes at their wide receiver depth chart. So you look at Okonkwo still with the potential to be the second or third target leader in that offense. And the ADP is very reasonable. Outside of the top 200, he's the tight end 29 in our ADP. So another guy that is just super, super cheap and just 25 years old. Definitely a player that I'm aggressively targeting. Maybe the first one that we've talked about here today that I'm really, really in on still.
Did you just say Chig is 25?
25 years old.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Dear Lord. Like, we really have been talking about him as like a sleeper tight end. It feels like it's for 5 years.
Yeah. I think this is just going to be his fourth year in the league, I believe.
Fourth year. You're right. It does seem like we've been talking about him as a breakout tight end for 4 years.
Yeah, well, Sniper Mel says that the scoring is crazy.
Yeah.
Scott Fishbowl this season.
He is right. Yeah, Chig, by the way, never missed a game in his first 3 seasons, played all 17 games each of the 3 years. Tight end 25, tight end 21, tight end 21 in those 3 years. So he's been consistent. And I'm looking for him to make at least a step up into that mid-teens range, at least give us a tight end 15 or 16 season, maybe even better than that.
Doug, any thoughts about Chig?
Yeah, I have him on one of my teams. I'm not letting him go right now. Best quarterback that he's going to have played with. And while he missed the Arthur Smith boat, I mean, when Arthur Smith cut his teeth there in Tennessee, or was the play caller, so he couldn't ruin him or pipe him up or whatever you think of Arthur Smith, he couldn't ruin him or build him up. So, Coach. Lou's, yeah, that's very good, Lou. Yes, but yeah, if Chig is a free agent in any of your dynasty leagues, I'm scooping him up. I think what Ryan said is very much within the range of outcomes. We're talking, I think top 20 is safe, and I think top 15 is very doable.
All right, Doug, where are you going with your first breakout? But before you do that, Sniper Mel wants to know where's Carla. Isn't that sad, Doug, when people come in and the first thing they ask you is not about you, it's about why else isn't there?
Well, I've had plenty of experience with this podcast getting this. So.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Where's JJ? Where's your girlfriend? We know where to find you, Doug.
Well, Doug, why don't you tell me? I mean, since you are here and we don't have anybody else, who is your first breakout tight end?
Well, as Brian said, it's easier. It seemed like it was easier job to find a breakout tight end, and I have much more confidence in the pick I'm going to make here than any of the receivers that we talk about being, every week starters. But Brenton Strange appeared much more likely to be a breakout candidate before the Jaguars moved heaven and earth to acquire Travis Hunter. Most of us know the rule by now. Dynasty managers want their tight ends to be no worse than the second best receiving option on their team. Strange will not qualify for that, as Brian Thomas Jr. and Hunter each to handle about a 25% target share, somewhere in that neighborhood. One other area that helps us identify potential breakouts at tight end is athleticism. In other words, athleticism seems to matter more at tight end than any other position. Fortunately, Strange does check that box. Now, going back to the 2023 combine, so must be a second year. His 10-yard split, vertical jump, and broad jump all ranked at the 82nd percentile or higher. So we are talking about a pretty decent athlete here. While the presence of Thomas and Hunter limits Strange fantasy ceiling, they also make his job easier. Defenses will have little choice but to keep their safeties deep because of the vertical threat that both Thomas and Hunter provide. Also working in Strange's favor is the relative lack of competition for snaps he has at his position in Jacksonville, as JJ Winter's favorite, Johnny Munt, is primarily a blocker.
That's great.
and Hunter Long, who I remember being kind of optimistic about Hunter Long. He only has 8 catches through 4 NFL seasons, and most of that time was with the Rams. New GM, James Gladstone, and new head coach Liam Cohen each talked up Strange's blocking prowess and run after catch ability before the draft, which should allow him to push for an 80% snap share and 70% route share. These are important thresholds for tight ends to meet, and there's no reason why he shouldn't reach them, because I just told you, are you playing Johnny Munt and Hunter Long in front of him? Probably not. While there's little chance that the Jaguars target the tight end position 137 times again in 2025, which I was shocked to learn that they targeted them that many last year, Strange and company should at least see 100. I think it's a good bet that Strange sees 80% of the tight end looks on that team. Only 13 tight ends attracted 80 targets last year. 11 of them finished among the top 14 in scoring at the fantasy scoring at their position. Cohen also has a penchant for feeding his tight ends. In his 2 seasons as an NFL offense coordinator, Tyler Higbee finished as the tight end 6 on 108 targets in 2022, and K. Dotton checked in as the tight end 14 last season. I feel confident projecting Strange as a top 15 tight end this season with top 10 upside. So I'm not the great with the transitions like JJJ is, but how strange are we going to get with Strange?
Oh, it's pretty good.
No, it's not bad, Doug. It's not
I didn't write that. Hey, I did that off the cuff. I did that off the cuff.
Wait, was that for Doug or was that for Brenton Strange, Jay?
No, listen. You
Who
talk
gets
about
the thumbs down?
You talk about Penn State tight ends. It's a natural that they are uber athletic, because everybody coming out of Penn State seems to perform very well at the combine. But what do you think about Strange this year? Is he going to be more of his 12 target games? Or, Ryan, do you think he's going to sort of fade away?
No, I don't see him fading away at all. I mean, I feel like a bigger opportunity coming for Brenton Strange. He almost feels like he doesn't fit in with some of the other names on the list, because he has been talked about so much really since before last season ended. He was kind of being viewed as that next sleeper, that next breakout tight end. And of course, once the Jaguars parted with Evan Ingram, that became even more likely, I guess. But Strange at tight end 24 in our ADP at DLF. I think there's still some meat on the bone there. And if you're a big believer, like it sounds like Doug is, with maybe even top 10 upside, there's room to grow there. I mean, guys like Cade Otton are ahead of him. I'd rather have Strange than Otton. Yeah. Pat Freiermuth is tight end 20. I think that's it's reasonable to prefer Brenton Strange over Freiermuth even at this point. So I think we're going to see Strange continue to rise slowly up the ranks in the ADP, and then potentially really skyrocket once the season starts.
All right, Brenton Strange. Well, let's stay at the same college, Ryan. Yeah. Who is your next breakout?
Yeah, good. That's a good transition, JJ.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, another Penn State guy. We do seem to chase these Penn State tight ends. There's a bunch of good ones. Theo Johnson is one of them that I'm interested in. This is another position. I was just kind of waiting to see if the Giants, actually the Jaguars, were the same situation. We penciled in Theo Johnson and Brenton Strange as starters back in January or February, and then we watch and see what happens through free agency. We watch and see what happens in the NFL draft. And basically with those two situations, nothing happened. So I think we can change that pencil to ink right now and assume that Theo Johnson's going to be the Giants starter at tight end. Daniel Bellinger's still there, but I think he's just a guy at this point. Theo Johnson's the tight end 26 in our ADP, just outside of the top 200. He did give us just one tight end one game last year as a rookie, which is probably to be expected given the challenges in that offense. But he was a tight end too. I know most leagues don't start two tight ends, so this is more about what this tells us down the road, but he was a tight end 2 in 5 games. So let's take that next step. Give us 5 or 6 tight end 1 games instead. Put up 10 to 12 to 14 points a game, and then we're really excited about Theo Johnson.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. It was interesting looking at him through the PFF lens and seeing how almost in every game you saw that growth, getting better across the board, learning the nuances of the professional type of tight end play that he needs to do to really perform this year. Doug, what are your thoughts on Theo Johnson?
Yeah, when I was talking about Strange, I mentioned 2 key things that we look for fantasy tight ends. You want a guy who's no worse than the number 2 target earner on his team, and you want a guy that's highly athletic. I'm sure Darius Slayton will probably be the number 2 target earner in New York, but that's not a guarantee by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sorry, there's Wendell Robinson. So, but with that new offense, well, not with the new offense, but with Russell Wilson, I'm not sure that he's going to be hyper targeting the slot either. So I think there's a world where he's the number 2, at least the second favorite target in New York. And we talked about Penn State tight ends. He's highly athletic. Theo Johnson is very athletic. So I'm not expecting a huge breakout here, but I am expecting I think Theo Johnson will provide useful weeks. I don't think there's much question about that.
All right, Theo Johnson producing some useful weeks. Sounds like something I'm interested in. Now, your last tight end, Doug, is not even listed as the first tight end on their depth chart. Who do you have for your breakout?
Well, we're talking about useful weeks at tight end. I'm more confident in Britton Strange offering those useful weeks consistently. This is going to be inconsistently. But as far as quote-unquote normal tight ends are concerned, Jatavion Sanders had a somewhat encouraging rookie season with 33 catches for 342 yards and a touchdown. His weekly snap share seemed to vary greatly, and just when it appeared he was becoming a full-time player around week 10 with a season-high 88% snap share, he suffered that scary neck injury the following week and never played more than 57% of team's plays after that. Before I go on, I should state that Sanders is not a great blocker and more of a flex tight end than a traditional option at the position. Carolina also fortified its pass-catching group in the offseason, as we talked about earlier, adding Tetairoa McMillan, Jimmy Horn Jr., and Hunter Renfrow. And we already had Xavier Legette, Adam Thielen, and Jalen Coker. So betting on him is a lot riskier than betting on Strange or Johnson or anybody else here. So with that said, tight ends like Sanders create mismatch issues for defenses more often than traditional slot receiver does. So there are reasons to believe why Sanders will remain a priority in this offense. Sanders' main contribution in the offense in 2025 figures to be as a seam stretcher who will benefit if McMillan is what I and many others believe he's going to be, and Xavier Legette emerges as a viable complement to him. Likely to fall behind McMillan, Thielen, and maybe even Legette in terms of target priority. I think Sanders will probably be frustrating for managers because his likely role will not lead itself to consistency. However, for those tight ends who can live with the pure upside and are willing to live with a low floor at tight end, Sanders may be an option who sneaks. The emphasis is on sneaks here. Sneaks inside the top 20 at the position. I think he's probably more like a top 25 option, but that will be a better offense. And if they use his size more in the red zone, I can see 4 or 5 touchdowns, and that may be enough to get him into low end tight end 2 territory. Any thoughts, guys?
As Luke Brunson said, it was interesting that after that neck injury, kind of missed out on the good half of the Bryce Young season.
Yeah.
That roller coaster ride, but you must be this tall to get on. Missed it a little bit. But Ryan, where are you on Jatavion Sanders?
Yeah, I like Sanders quite a bit. Not worried about like the Tommy Trimbles of the world that are hanging around Carolina. Sanders gave us a couple of tight end 1 games last year, 3 more in that tight end 2 range. The next 12. I think he can take that next step. Some of the same concerns with the other tight ends, some of the other tight ends that we talked about, and and as the same conversation with Hunter Renfrow, just how crowded that depth chart looks all of a sudden at receiver. So that's the concern for me when it comes to Sanders. But he's still super cheap and a player that I'm interested in. I mean, we haven't had a viable tight end in Carolina since Greg Olsen. Olsen. That's so pretty ugly there. And obviously we're talking about multiple coaching staffs, multiple quarterbacks since then. So I don't know what it is about Carolina in the tight end position, but maybe Sanders can break that mold a little bit.
Well, I think if you look at a lot of my dynasty rosters, we're all searching for tight ends. There's not that many to go around who seem to be consistent contributors to their offenses. Lou says that he loves Sanders as a tight end 3, that he could get some usable weeks out of. Gentlemen, is there any other tight end you want to talk about?
I'll throw one out there just because he has been discussed a lot this offseason. Eventually, one of these years, Zach Ertz is going to break down, and Ben Sinnott is waiting in the wings. We're talking about athleticism again. He's got it, and we saw that the offense will target the tight end, and Sinnott's ready to go. I mean, I think if he gets the opportunity, we're looking at somebody who enters the tight end 2 discussion right away.
Yeah, I had Sinnott on my just miss list as well. And I mean, I think there's a ton of rookies this year specifically. And, there probably are every year, but I seem to be paying closer attention to it this year. A ton of rookies from last year's class that basically did what we would expect them to do. And now they're losing value. I mean, I don't think very many people expected Ben Sinnott to overtake Zach Ertz, to beat him out for the starting tight end job. Yet his ADP has fallen essentially off the table. I mean, 277 overall, tight end 41. You might have to wait another full year. You might have to wait another full year because Zach Ertz is back. Zach Ertz is one of the best tight ends of the past decade. So, I mean, he's going to fade eventually, but it's obviously a very talented player. So I like Sinnott as a stash. I don't know if we'll get to use him this year, but I do like him long term. I mean, I think the really easy one here, again, feels like cheating a little bit, but it would technically be a breakout year, is Isaiah Likely. We saw a lot of hints of that potential breakout, that potential weekly starting tight end from him last year. And, there's been the Mark Andrews trade rumors. And I mean, the second Mark Andrews is off that team, you won't be able to buy Isaiah Likely. The value will go crazy. So I would, it's already tough to target him because everybody understands, what I just said. Everybody's already in on Isaiah Likely as a player that we want to get in our lineups. The other one I was tempted to say here is Noah Gray. And it's, it's a matter of time with Travis Kelce as well. Of course, there was some talk that maybe he would retire after last season, or really even there were retirement rumors the season before that. He's a year-to-year guy at this point, obviously. And hopefully Gray can get his chance before he's 27 or 28 years old. We'll see.
Just as I don't know anyone finds this interesting except for myself, but in the Kings Classic last year, in my auction league, the 14-team auction, I was plugging in Noah Gray as my starting tight end. I think at least a couple of times toward the end, because whether they were limiting Kelsey's snaps a little bit, he was being made a priority. And sometimes the tight end, if you can get 4 catches for 40 yards, amen. And sometimes that's what and he was getting some of that toward the end. So I sign off on that one.
Now, Floyd Pinkerton brings up, I mean, the pink elephant in the room. What about Kyle Pitts? Is he finally going to get the respect he deserves?
Well, he's gotten the respect, especially early in his career, maybe before he deserved it. I don't know. People define breakouts in different ways. Pitts certainly hasn't lived up to the hype, but I think he did. I think he did give us a tight end one season as a rookie. So, we've already had the breakout. We just need a rebound season from Kyle Pitts. Another guy that there's been trade rumors surrounding, and at this point, I'd be totally fine with Kyle Pitts on a new roster. A guy that probably could use that fresh start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you this real quick. So going into the offseason, I had him on two teams. One was an orphan, and then one I drafted him on. I'm keeping him on the one team that I drafted him on. I'm willing to cut my losses on him. But the other thing I wanted to mention, JJ and I did a show during the regular season last year where we kind of broke down Pitt's route running, and it was a particular. I can't remember if he got hurt. I don't remember what it was, but the breakout, I hate to say it, is going to be up to him. If he comes in focused, he will break out. But if he's going to lollygag on routes like he was at points last year, then he's going to go into free agency, and then we'll be talking him being part of the 13 package in Chicago.
All right, gentlemen, I wanted to take a moment for a non-fantasy related topic. A little over a month ago, a couple days over, my son had a medical incident. To say that it shook me and my wife to our core is an understatement. And the two people who I reached out to during this the most are on the pod tonight. Doug, I've already thanked you enough, so you're not getting any more. You're done. It went to your head.
Obviously.
So we're just cutting you off. But seriously though, Ryan, you were there for me that entire time, reaching out, praying for me, praying for my son, praying for my family. And I really just wanted to say, without getting emotional, thank you. I don't know if you really know how much it meant to me and my family. But I can't begin to thank you enough. So thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for being who you are.
Oh man. Well, you're welcome, first of all, certainly. And praying for you and your son, and just checking in and reaching out was certainly the least I could do. I was glad to do that, and I'm going to keep doing those things. I don't know. Sometimes I think in life in general, but certainly in the fantasy space as well, you just kind of meet people that you click with automatically, and you feel, for whatever reason, you feel some type of closeness with that you don't with other people. And JJ, I don't know what it is. It's probably just your awesome personality, or just how great of a guy you are in general. But I felt that with you the first time I met you. We've had some good conversations over the years, and you're certainly a guy in the space that I care a lot about and think a lot of. So just glad to be there for you anytime I can.
Yeah. And, I was really interested when you told me this past off season, we always chat on the interwebs, just about stepping back from content and diving more into your faith. And, we've talked a lot about this, like faith isn't something that I have in the same way that you do. But do you want to talk a little bit about that and like where your journey has taken you?
Yeah, for sure. So, I started playing Dynasty fantasy football over 20 years ago at this point. I played Dynasty before I played redraft. I'm one of those weirdos that somehow started with Dynasty. So that's been my preference all along. And, I was just bitten by the Dynasty bug from jump, from the beginning. I loved it. And really became, I don't know, infatuated with it, I guess would be the word. Before DLF, before Twitter, I was always like the most active person in my league. I was super active, like on Football Guys message board. We're going back almost a couple decades here at this point. And I mean, fantasy football and Dynasty just became one of the biggest priorities in my life. And that became more true once I started at DLF, and once I was creating content, and once I was getting paid to create content. And, you know, I would go on podcast and people would say, like, how are you, you know, how do you do all these things? How do you write and do the podcast? And you're on Twitter. And I mean, I would always say, you know, I had a very understanding wife. That was kind of the answer. And that was very true. But you know, the real answer is I spent way more time doing fantasy football stuff when I should have been devoting that time to my family, to my faith, to my day job. And my priorities were way out of whack, to be honest. So at some point about a year and a half ago, you know, it kind of hit me in the face that if I don't fix this, you know, my life is not going to be what I want it to be. And I might have a ton of followers on Twitter and, you know, some kind of recognition that doesn't really matter in the big picture. But that's not what I really wanted. So certainly I'm still podcasting. I'm still writing. I'm still on Twitter. I'm still doing those things. I'm still running Dynasty leagues, but I've tried to take a big step back in general from those things and just step into, honestly, things that are more important and that matter more, even than Dynasty football, even though we love it so much.
Yeah, well, I am a huge fan of yours. What you said before about me was so kind. Thank you. And you know, I feel the same way. The first time I met you and Eric, in Canton, like I don't know. You're right. You meet certain people, and I'll often talk to Doug about that visit to the expo.
Yeah.
And the group that was in that first room that I saw, I was just like, these are great people. Like, and I don't know what it was, but I am so appreciative again for everything that you bring to this community, for bringing me into your kitchen sink league, or although it drives me freaking insane. Oh Lord, that thing gives me heart attack, but
it's a tough one.
It is a tough one. And I appreciate that challenge and I appreciate you. Yeah. I don't really know where to go from there, but I love you, brother. I really love you.
I love you too, man. Love you too, for real. Thank you guys for having me on tonight. It was a good talk and always good to see both of you.
It was our pleasure. Definitely our pleasure.
Definitely our pleasure. Doug, do you have anything you want to tag before we say goodbye?
No, I'm still in the same holding pattern with the start of my content schedule this summer. So those will come out. My first articles will come out in the next probably around June 15th, somewhere in that neighborhood. So other than that, catch me on my handle for Blue Sky and Twitter, as you see on the screen.
All right, for me, you know where to find me. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Ryan, of course, for everything. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Like, subscribe, yada, yada, all that stuff. We're going to be back next Wednesday, 8 p.m. With our guest, Theo Greminger. So be sure to tune in. Until then, remember, be safe, be well, and as always, boat drinks, my friends, boat drinks.